today. So first I'll open it up to public comments, see if there's any comments from the public. Seeing none, we'll move to the acceptance of the December minutes, and I'm going to have to pull this item because we are still working on those minutes from our last meeting. So I'd like to pull that and bring it back for your consideration in the next meeting, if that's okay with the committee. I'd also like to get your approval to amend the agenda to add an item 2G, which is a discussion of the transit task force. And this was an item that was directed by the COG board at their last meeting. We had a brief discussion with the executive management group. So then I'd like to update both city and county staff of that discussion and then get your recommendation before we go back to the board with a recommendation on the transit task force. So if it's okay, can I amend the agenda to add that item?
Under the Brown Act, I'm not sure if we can, unless it's an urgency item that has to be taken care of today.
I would like for it to be considered an urgency item to carry forward to the COG board at the March meeting, rather than delay the March meeting.
Okay.
So then I think if I have the vote of the majority of the council, the committee.
And that item G is informational only.
It is informational and discussion. You don't have to take formal action.
Okay.
We can just, and since it is, if you want to think about it a little bit, Robert, get back to me, you and Deborah. But I just want to give you an update on what the discussion was with the Executive Management Committee and see if you guys have any initial thoughts about that item. So if it's okay then, and due to the time constraints and wanting to take it to the March meeting, then I think I just need a vote of the majority of the committee to add it.
I'll make the motion to add 2G.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So then let's go into item 2A, which is the Calaveras Transit Quarterly Report. Deborah, I'd like to invite you up in case you'd like to add any information on this report. Where do I go? There you go.
Hot seat.
So Calaveras Transit has included the second quarterly report, October through December 31st, 2014. And Deborah, feel free to add any new information you'd like the committee to know about your report.
Well, I think the most outstanding feature of the report is that in this quarter, we exceeded the minimum fare box recovery ratio requirement. So it is 11.58%. Still, it's just a snapshot, doesn't mean that the year is turned around, but it's going in the right direction. Other than that, ridership remains low, lower than it had been last year. And we'll continue working on this. We're going to expand on the notable events and try and add to that as we go. For a while I was thinking we'd do a newsletter, but this kind of works in with this, and we'll work for discussion both at the Council of Governments and the Board of Supervisors. So the three items that are outlined in this report are Calaveras Transit shuttle at the Gold Rush Day, the bus events, and planning activities for the 2015 disaster exercise, a simulated wildfire that's going to take place in April.
Very good. Deborah, when does this go before the Board of Supervisors?
I'm hoping if I can get back to the office to do the staff report, it will be March 10th.
Okay.
Otherwise, the 24th.
Okay. And then we received the discussion paper from Cliff Chambers on the short-range transit plan. And so we might want to talk with you, Amber and I, when we have a chance to look at it together. There's a number of questions just related to the performance measures, and we talked a little bit about that at the last meeting. So we may want to try to coordinate with your March 10th meeting some sort of discussion on transit goals.
That would be great.
And objectives. Okay. Because there's really a lot of policy decisions that need to come from that, from a discussion with the board. Okay. Sounds good. So March 10th.
So what is, did I get a copy of that?
Nobody's gotten it. I don't, Deborah hasn't gotten a copy of it. I
He
literally
hasn't
just got
drafted
it this morning. And, so Amber and I are gonna take a look at it, but I just now am feeling more pressure to get it, an administrative draft if you have a March 10th transit item going forward. So
But if-
when is it due? It would be due now, though.
It would be due yesterday. If you'd like
Okay.
to add to it, we could make it for March 24th.
Wait, before we get all started, if you're talking about taking an admin draft to the board,
We're not.
No.
You will get a copy. I'm just
Okay.
wanting to know what her presentations to the boards are for transit, because I just got,
For the-
it's not even a tech memo, it's a memo to me. It hasn't even turned into an admin draft with
Okay.
questions for me. But I think before we really move into the draft, we should probably get in front of the Board of Supervisors with a discussion on their direction, their mission, their vision, and then we can incorporate that into the admin draft. But when she mentioned, I would love an opportunity to dovetail with an already existing presentation, but I don't think we'll get it done in time.
Okay, so for the March 24th, I hope to have another transit item for the board.
You
If
do?
want.
Okay,
It'll be kind of a different sort of thing. It will be the notice of completion for the bus shelters.
okay.
But
When do you guys take your budget?
The major budget's gonna be presented next week.
Next week, okay.
So that's the
Okay.
time.
All right. Well, we might have to do something a little bit
It
different.
can be
Okay.
separated. We can talk about transit every board meeting.
Okay, that sounds good.
Exactly.
A question?
Yes,
Why-
please.
Why do you think the ridership was down? Any guess, any?
I think a lot of it, and this is a good guess, is that Columbia College has reduced its classes.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the only single thing, there might be other little spot things, but
Okay, great.
that's a factor.
Wow, so it's not that they were just out of school, they've actually reduced
They've
the number of
reduced
classes
the
that
number
they're
of
offering?
offerings, yeah.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay. All right. Unless there's any questions from the committee for Deborah? If not, then let's
I'll
move into
return to the
your
audience.
2B, so you get to stay there.
Oh.
So, Deborah is also item 2B, the Arnold Rim Trail project and notice of completion. And so, Deborah, is there anything that you wanted to report to the committee on the notice of completion for
No,
the Arnold Rim?
The Board of Supervisors has accepted as complete, and so this will be going to the COG board for ratification.
Very good. Congratulations. And then you'll be working with us on the final invoices?
Working on the report of final expenditures, and we still have to complete the maintenance agreement with the Forest Service.
Okay.
So there's still some work on that project as far as that goes.
All right. That is item 2B, unless there's any questions from the advisory committee on item 2B and the completion of the Arnold Rim Trail. All right, well, congratulations. All right, then we will move into the state controller's report of the transit assistance preliminary estimates. So Melissa, if you'd like to come up and present those estimates.
Every year, we receive from the state controller's office estimates. This is transit assistance, and this is the 15-16 preliminary estimate. I provided it to Deborah. Right now, it's $225,810. So throughout the year, you receive updates so that you can plan and budget accordingly. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
what's that zero?
I think we brought this.
Yeah, so this is, there's one based on population, and then there's one based on fare box recovery.
Okay.
And so Amber, maybe you can join in this discussion of what that, and why we have zero. I think we've investigated it, and I think
State
we've
Controller's
misreported in the
office.
state controller's office.
State
And-
Controller's report.
Yeah.
Calaveras Transit does a state controller's report
Okay.
to the state, and in that, they have to report their fare box ratio.
Mhm.
So this section code is based on that. So we haven't made fare box and therefore we haven't been allocated revenue.
So if we make fare box ratio for the year, then that zero turns into another number.
And Amber, you can.
No, I'll make a correction, actually, we talked to the state controller's office, and they just simply state that you have to be an Article 4 claimant to be eligible under that.
What's an Article 4 claimant?
Well, under TDA, there's Article 4 and Article 8.
So
And
what,
we're currently Article 8, but we have questions that we need to talk with our training and performance auditor about as to why we've never received that, even when we were
Article 4, we did
It
receive it.
looks like there's a separate section in the Public Utilities Code,
Exactly.
UC 9314, and all the ones that are zeros are typically the more rural counties, so it's probably a certain amount of money that goes towards more urban transit system,
And we're not,
and we
It's-
just
we're
don't
not.
qualify for it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, not necessarily true, because you
No.
look at Alpine and Amador.
so the issue that we had though is the way that the
Sure.
county filed. So they've historically been Article 4. We think that there's something with the state controller's report that they submit every year that we've misreported that information. Because
Right.
when we look back at the estimates, we've never received those funds regardless of how we claim. This makes sense this year because we're filing Article 8. And so they started filing Article 8 so that we could have the locally preferred fare box recovery ratio, so
Right.
we could get them out of the penalty cycle.
Right.
And so I believe now I'll
The
have to go
county
back and look at their
auditor
TDA
even looked at that
claim
first.
and see how they filed.
Article
I think
4.
you went back to Article 4.
Did, yeah.
So we're gonna have to look into it with the triennial performance auditor, because when we went back and we looked at the last 7 years of estimates, they've never received the funding, even though they've been Article 4 claimants. So that was kind of our understanding, and one is, I think, a formula distribution by population, and the other one is a formula distribution based on your percentage of fares, I think.
Fares throughout the state.
Throughout
So
the
they
state.
take all the fares received from all the transit agencies throughout the state, and you receive the percentage that you contribute.
Right.
basically.
So we'll get about $50.
Yeah. So, but we do need to look into it, because even though zero right now makes sense, zero did not make sense 3 years ago when we were claiming Article 4. There should have been some dollar amount there, though very small.
Well, and the other thing is that, I mean, this transit agency has been around for what, longer than 5 years, right? So I'm assuming that we were Article 4, there could be monies that we didn't receive even from the beginning, that if we were Article 4, that we didn't get. So,
Yeah, we went
Looked
back and looked
into
over
that.
the last 7 years and never received them.
is there a way that we could, based on estimates of what we've lost?
Well, I think it's how the county reports in the state controllers report, and then the state controllers takes that information, and so we would have to probably, I don't know if there will be a going back,
No.
but we'll look with the triennial performance auditors and have a conversation about it.
And I even conferred with the county auditor. She checked with the state controller's office, and that was her finding also.
That there's no going back.
No,
But going forward, now that we're in Article 4, if we make
we aren't
$4,
in Article 4, and
Yeah.
we are?
This year,
Yeah.
We
for the
switched?
first year,
Okay.
we switched.
so we're switching back. So if we make fare box recovery in 2014, 15, then we should receive something in that column, right?
But then you have to look over the whole state.
We
And
should
then-
receive
Well, that's
something.
fine, but I mean, everybody, I mean, even Alpine got, what, $321? I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's not much, but at least I hate seeing that zero when there's a possibility of some money going in there.
No matter how big or small.
Yeah.
Agreed.
You know,
Agreed.
so,
So Dave, we will have this as an action item to follow up with the triennial performance auditor. And then, first, we just want to understand, we want to make sure we understand it correctly, and then
yeah.
see what the opportunity was and where we can correct it. All right, unless there's any more questions on those estimates, then I'll turn it over to Melissa for item 2D, an update on the executive management group's review of the overall work program.
Thank you. Staff presented the draft 15-16 overall work program to the executive management group on February 10th. They reviewed and recommended that the overall work program be presented to the council at the March 4th meeting. If you look at the draft, the only new project that was added is work element number 9, and that's the RTP update, which we've allocated RTP or RPA funding to. This may change. The COG had applied for 2 planning grants, and if those planning grants are awarded, within our final and our amendment 1, we may be shifting funding so we can utilize the RPA funding. Do you have anything to add?
We don't anticipate, we really want to wait for the completion of the general plan. So we don't anticipate beginning this in the beginning of the 15-16 year. We anticipate probably the end of the 15-16 year. I think according to our update, it needs to be completed by 2017. So we anticipate wanting to give ourselves about a year and a half to complete that. But because we need a placeholder on those RPA funds, we've budgeted here. But we hope as this year closes out, we know more about the planning priorities. And we are hopeful still for the San Andreas grant that we wrote, and then we also wrote another Angels Camp grant for historic downtown Angels. So with those, that will loosen up some RPA funds. And then we'll probably only program a percentage so we can begin the RFP process and then have someone working for us at the start of the next fiscal year.
And as you may notice, there's no carryover funding identified. That usually comes after the county has closed and we receive our certification of expenditures from Caltrans, which is around October. So Amendment 1 is really our going forward where we clearly identify the actual carryover in the revenue. I don't think we have any carryover projects. Arnold Rim will be completed. And Robert, I think I should meet with you. I think there was $80,000 on a project that was been in the OWP and it's not in the draft. I talked to Melissa and it's programmed on one of your, the government center bikeway. So I'll be putting that back into the
So
overall
we just
work
need to
program.
know if you anticipate being through environmental, because that was $80,000 on environmental for that project.
So we've had it since 9-10, fiscal year 9-10 on the overall work program.
Right, that's the part that connects with the Mountain Range Road, State Route 49 improvements that are going from Government Center out.
Right.
And then that piece that you're talking about is the extension of that into Government Center.
Okay.
So if you
So
need
that's
to
still
claim it
going
now,
forward.
you can claim it now from me, and then I won't need to amend it.
Well, we'll
No?
talk.
You're right, you're right.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're right. So if, because I think you're already in the phase, you've already got billable work. And
So
so
you
this
can
has been
claim it.
sitting there for a while. You can claim those funds.
Before June, and I won't need to
Okay,
amend.
okay.
Do you want to
Because you
talk
do
about
have
it?
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I have that meeting I told you about that's coming up with Caltrans, where we're gonna talk about some of those issues.
Because I thought is environmental, oh, it's not complete.
That's the deal.
Okay, okay. Okay.
Does
So-
anyone
Well, we
have-
just knew billable work
Okay.
was ongoing, and so the funds are there to claim. If you don't, then we'll amend this work program and include them in the final.
So what happened to the circulation element amount that was?
I'm hoping that you'll close that out this year too.
There is,
Yeah, 22 is on the current overall work program. This is the draft for 15-16. So you have till June to claim in the other overall work program, in the 14-15.
and if we wish for that to be in the,
I thought you were
15-16.
complete. I
Well,
thought
we're
we
still-
saw completion.
we're still working on that. It's still,
Yeah, we don't adopt the plan yet, so the board could definitely change the land use element, then affect the circulation element.
that's what
And a
that
ripple
money is
effect.
in there
Okay.
for, is to take care of that.
Oh, I thought it was reported at a previous TAC that you were complete. So I'm
Complete?
sorry.
No.
So,
I
Okay,
haven't had
so
any invoices.
we can just talk about how we want to handle that, just because this is the draft. We could carry them both over if you don't think that you're going to spend them in this fiscal year, just
Before
those
June.
dollar amounts.
You don't
For
think
the
you'll-
circulation element, no,
No.
I'm
And
pretty
then-
sure of that. That's,
Yeah.
the discussions are just starting right now.
Okay, and then
Yes,
Okay.
I'm hoping to have some pretty good information after that meeting that
Okay.
I believe is gonna happen here in the coming week. And it has to do with the environmental work, so it's exactly this
Okay,
thing.
so
that
you're
we're
aware
talking
of the
about.
balance, what you have for the circulation element?
Yeah,
Okay,
that
22,000.
hasn't changed
so then
for
No,
some time.
no, yeah, no
Right,
invoices.
right,
so-
I'm aware of that.
Okay,
So then, Melissa, if it's okay with the advisory committee, we'll carry over the circulation element and the 22,000. And then we're going to have further discussions with Robert on the 80. Don't worry if this goes forward and gets approved. We will carry over in the final. Our amendment number 1 is what we consider our final anyway, which captures all of our carryover and all of those projects that are going to roll over. This is sort of just placeholders. Dave, you'll see in yours that it's practically time stood still, like 0% expended, just because it's all of the information that we have right now.
yeah.
So there is a final draft that gets approved in June, and there's an amendment number 1. So the money doesn't disappear, we can always carry it over.
Yep.
So does this include all of your budget as well?
It does,
All
and the
your
executive management committee approved
Approved our
the
operations.
operations budget.
Yep.
And then that's in here?
Yes.
That's all
Exactly.
in here.
On all the work elements from 1 through 16. Yep,
So-
anything in the COG column is
That's
our
our
operations
operations.
budget.
So, if I'm understanding this, and I know, I've probably gone over this many times before, so everything, like in the LTF, everything that's COG is your budget, is
Yeah.
you, right?
Yep,
Same
and the
with-
project.
So that's where your funding's coming from, LTF, regional RSTP, and the RPA.
PPM.
PPM.
PPM, we're utilizing 38,000.
And so Dave, remember, when you look at those numbers in budget, those
These
are
are estimates.
worst case scenarios. That's assuming we have no carryover. So that's not the case. We always have carryover. And
Yep.
then what we do is we add those carryover funds in the lines above, and we reduce
No, I
the
understand,
current.
yeah, I understand that, but I just wanna make sure I'm understanding where this
Yep.
money, so right now, the majority are 172, which is, you're taking most of your admin money out of LTF and RSTP.
Mhm.
Okay.
Because as we reported PPM and RPA funding, we try to move those towards the projects and the consultants.
So PPM is down this
From
year.
54 to 38.
So
And
that's.
it'll go
estimate.
back up based on wagon trail work. When we allocate design, then that'll go back up next year.
Yep.
But it's a lull this year. RPA is going up, but RPA is getting difficult to program. You can't program any indirect expenses, and it has to be on all RPA eligible. So historically, you had RTPAs that were using RPA really for their operations budget, because they said we're a planning agency. Then no, now it needs to go to eligible direct costs. So salaries and benefits are direct costs, but it has to be on eligible planning projects. And so yours is one. Hopefully if we get those other 2 grants, then we'll be able to use some RPA there and then push back the RTP of Dave.
So if that's the case, then is that saying that there could be, we had the regional transportation plan update, but in the future that we could, because I had a planning project that got pretty
Yep.
much, got iced out in the project,
Yep.
that's where that would go?
That's,
Well, let me follow up, and is that going to be necessarily eligible for when we do call for projects, that money is also allocated to projects? Because none of the RPA money since I've been here is, it's kind of, well, COG's doing this project and COG's doing that project.
We
but-
paid for the Angels Creek Master Plan and Trail with RPA and PPM, 5,000.
yeah, so we do
Okay.
pay for, and really the city is,
Been
I think, more
utilizing.
progressive in asking COG to use RPA for planning funds, because I think we've funded more of your planning documents with
Yep.
RPA. And that's what we're using right now for the Gateway Corridor. And
Right.
if we're able to kind of negotiate an agreement with Caltrans, we'll use those funds as well,
Right.
I think, to go to Caltrans staff. So, but we are kind of looking what our mandatory planning functions are. So obviously it goes to those mandatory planning functions first, RTP updates, the bike ped updates, the coordinated human services, our mandatory COG core functions. Beyond that, then I think it's open for discussion between the member agencies and the Council of Governments as to our priority list of planning projects for the year.
Right.
But that being said, the county hasn't ever really been as aggressive as I would say the city has in approaching COG for planning dollars.
Right.
So
Well,
but I think I'm open to the whole discussion and how we make those planning dollars available to both jurisdictions, I think will be part of the upcoming discussion.
Well, yeah, because I mean, even when we did the call for projects back when the Angels Creek Master Plan was approved, because we knew there was RPA money available, so that's how that project got funded. But the last two calls, it's only been LTF and RSTP that have been, and CMAC that have been the projects that have been, or the funding sources that have been used. So
Yep.
I'm just curious about. I know PPM has mostly been used for your administration costs, and all that's we've kind of stayed away
The
from.
planning programming.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we've kind of stayed on that, but.
And RPA, the primary, it is discretionary funds of the COG, but we primarily use it for those mandatory planning functions first. And then if we're through the mandatory planning functions, which I think we're getting towards, we'll have completed the coordinated, we'll have completed the bike ped, we'll be
Triennial.
We'll be in an odd year with the RTP update, because I don't anticipate diving in with both feet and programming all the money in 15-16. So I think that there might actually be room this year. But if you guys get those planning grants, then
Right.
then that's where the money's
Yeah,
going, is
exactly,
towards those
yeah.
planning grants.
So this item is due to Caltrans, March 1st, and I've emailed Carl and let him know our meeting is on the 4th. So if the TAC has any other questions?
I had a question.
Sure.
Who are the members of the Executive Management Committee?
That is the city administrator, Michael McCatton, the CAO, the COG board chair, and the COG board vice chair. So that's John Gomes now, and then Elaine Morris. So the executive management committee, Robert, with the new GAPA and the new policies and procedures, is much bigger than it was previously. And so now they are advisory to the council. While you're advisory to the council on all of the technical, transportation, and planning related functions of this organization, they are advisory to the council on all the administrative, the budgetary, the personnel, all of those assets of the COG.
So we're not gonna see the budgets anymore, or?
No, I don't
Or
think
the
with the
financial
executive
report.
management committee reviews and approves the budget. So that's one of the things we're trying to streamline too, is that we have to prepare these things so many really months and weeks ahead, trying to get them before an executive management group, trying to get them before a technical advisory group,
Then the meeting.
then trying to get them before the board. So I feel with the executive management group approving the operations budget, personnel decisions, all of the financial information, then that's cleared that house. The recommendation can go before the COG board. Where we bring the overall work program is because it's related to the technical work of planning, the transportation functions, where technical staff would be weighing in and contributing to what's on the overall work program.
But then we don't know what you've been approved for your operations budget, so.
It's in the overall work program,
It's in all
so
the COG
the
columns.
COG,
Okay, so
that is,
that's the COG column right now.
Yep.
And it
That's saying
equals
that's right.
512,000. And it was an increase over last year's operations budget by $817.
Where's that at?
It's not on here. We
Right,
took-
right.
it's just
we
the,
took-
that's what the
If you-
executive management is approved.
Yeah, if you added up all the COG columns, that would equal 512,000.
All the COG column?
Yeah, so you know how,
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
yeah, so that's always our operations budget, what's in the COG, and then what is contract is always what we contract out, whether it's either to the city or county or to contracts that we hold. And if you remember, when the COG made the decision to streamline the overall work program and develop the CIP, the goal is
County.
there's no city and county projects on here other than those planning projects that are required to go through the COG. So really, this overall work program
Our core.
are our COG core functions. And so at some point, you know, when we look at this, even the contracts, they might be contracts that we have with you, say Dave on yours. But this really gets down to just being COG's work program.
Right.
And then city and county capital projects now are reflected in the CIP. Because you remember how this was more, so really, when that transition is complete, this will be everything. Our operations budget, all of our contracts, and it
Right.
will just be COG.
Right, okay.
That was the goal.
I just wanted to make sure,
Yeah.
because if we're not gonna see the budgets, at least if we see these, then we know that, at least we know what your totals are. We don't necessarily need to know your line items, but we do need to know the totals. So that's,
Yep.
that's.
And they're in the
And where,
work
and
program.
where they're coming from.
Yeah. And so I think with this transition, it'll become less confusing because every dollar you see here will be COG. They're all COG dollars. They're not city and county dollars. The only county dollars that'll go back in are gonna be the circulation element and then the Mountain Ranch Road. But we hope to exit that this year, or even work something out where we can exit that this year
Yeah.
and just move on with this work program. You guys might even claim
Yeah,
the
you can
circulation
claim it.
element.
You can claim it and manage it yourself. It's only 22,000. You know, the last contract I had was the LSC, and so,
Right.
like I said, there's been no invoices, and it's, you know, been in here for a while.
Right.
So we might just talk about that to
Start
try to
claiming
get
the
the,
money.
yeah. But Dave, what you should be looking at, you know, is really our work plan, our budget, just COG. What we say we're gonna do and where the money's going. So any questions about the projects that we've got identified for the year so far? Or any other planning project priorities or needs?
Just one last question.
Sure.
On the contract, like the 150,000, that's the money for Caltrans. Like the 58,000 for the transit, that's like the Cliff Chambers money, right?
Yep.
That's your consultant contracts?
Yep.
Okay, it's contracts.
So everything you see here are projects that we administer. Yeah.
That's
So
what-
projects that you administer though, whether they're planning or capital, we won't put on here anymore.
Right. I got that. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure. 'Cause,
Yep.
I mean, looking at this, I'm looking at it like I did 4 or 5 years ago, where there was like 45 million, items on the column, and so now things are getting stripped off. We talked about the capital stuff, and I just want, okay. So yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah, so. Yep.
Any other questions?
I don't think so. Are there any other questions from the committee? So with your direction, we would like to take this to the COG board. So feel free to continue to review. If you have any questions, let us know.
Well,
Robert?
We should probably make a motion and do all that, right?
Well, I think that that's something that we're working with the executive management committee meeting on too. And I think with the amount of time that you get to approve, I think I'm really happy with the review of the item, the discussion of the item, getting all of your questions and concerns worked out, and then getting your direction to take the item forward to the COG board. So not necessarily that I'm asking for your formal approval of it as it sits, because obviously there's more discussions with the county to be had, but I would just like your direction to take it to the full COG board for their consideration.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Active Transportation Volunteer Program, what is
Yeah.
that?
So that is what the Calaveras Council of Governments approved this year. So it'll be next year.
Currently, yeah.
And we have Joan Mazzetti, who is our Active Transportation Volunteer Coordinator.
Mhm.
And she is working on, creating an active transportation program in Calaveras and Angels Camp.
Okay.
So she's starting with, getting COG more involved in the county public health walk. So we might be able to, with her help, volunteer to support that effort. I think that it's really important, and actually in conversations with Caltrans District 10, they were really happy to hear that a rural agency is getting out wanting to promote active transportation. One of the things that we struggle with in San Andreas and Angels Camp, more so San Andreas, is which comes first, the pedestrian or the crosswalk. And
Geez, I was just walking in there a couple days ago.
yeah,
That's the
so
truth.
I think when we are getting and sort of marketing this idea of bike and ped and the need for bike ped facilities in a positive way, I think it goes a long way with the district, who's also, I think, from a statewide agenda, wanting to showcase those opportunities and partnerships. So
is this something that will grow in the future? I mean, is this, besides Joan, besides Joan, is it something that, it'll be Joan and Jim, because now they're marketing and they're doing that, or is it just Joan out there right now marketing? Because I see volunteer, I see.
you know what, it might grow. You know how Matt Boyer did the presentation to the COG board,
Right.
and he talked about we're going to have to change our way of doing business. There's not enough money to get it all done.
Right.
And so he talked about the return to the local barn raising, and he had this really successful initiative called Paint What Matters. And so it was all volunteer driven. It takes very little resources, and what you can see here is our commitment is really coming from our COG operations budget. It's existing staff time that we're putting towards it, and very little in contract. And I think in the contract opportunity, we're actually looking to work with the Visitors Bureau, who has sort of an interactive web map already.
And then we
So-
have our walk bike.
And our walk bike, Calaveras, we're
Website.
looking to build and enhance that. But we're looking at projects that come before the COG board that community members consistently advocate for. And what kind of role could COG play in sort of facilitating that? One is the gateway monuments. We have the San Andreas community that did the community cleanup day. I think that was kind of another example of how you can use volunteer resources. You don't have to use taxpayer dollars, and you can accomplish a lot of things. So Melissa was doing some research on other RTPAs and their volunteer programs and how they use them for capital projects, how they use them for community cleanups, how they use them to organize community walks. So I think we're going to be looking more into it. And I think as the dollars become fewer and fewer and the demands on the local jurisdictions become greater, I think this call for projects was really indicative of where the jurisdictions are. Previous projects, we did the town hall project.
Right.
We did a lot of transportation enhancement projects, the Shea, Arnold Rim. And this year, the city and county were saying we really need local streets and roads money. And I don't think that's going to change. So then, what happens to the wayfinding? What happens to the gateway monumentation? What happens to the community projects?
Like
So
the
Melissa,
stairs.
Where is it? I mean,
I
so
ask you, Melissa, what's the work product then for this money? What
This
is the
work element is in the current overall work program
Yeah, let's see
also.
if I have a copy.
I know, but
No, I didn't
is there like
bring the
a,
work
is there like
elements.
a,
Did
is there
you?
like a program document, is there like a policy thing, is there set goals on how,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
what they're supposed, what's providing for, or,
Yeah, and you know what? We
I
didn't
know
bring
we talked about this, I know we but
Oh,
I just.
definitely, because it was
No.
already approved.
Yeah, it was approved, the work element, and we have work element. We didn't bring the whole packet because
We're still
the
working on
majority
it.
of them are the same.
Right.
The only project we added is the RTP update, and you know what that is. And then this one is carryover. So let me go back and take a look, find out where it is.
So,
Well, I
So
think
it's-
that one would be like we have in our overall work program, like tasks and deliverables, and some deliverables would be the interactive web map on the bike walk website, or enhancing the one that the Visitors Bureau has.
right.
And then events, like scheduled events, marketing materials. I mean, it's not gonna be like a plan, like the Safe Routes to School
No.
or Bike Ped plan. It's actual doing the work and executing,
So,
tasks.
okay, and that's covered in Joan's contract,
Joan doesn't have a contract.
She's a
She's
volunteer.
a
volunteer.
volunteer, so
She works for free.
Yeah.
then who's the $10,000 contract with?
That we set
That
aside
would be
for
web
Our,
the web map, and
And
hopefully we'll be working with the Visitors Bureau. And COG approved that in the work program last year. So that has already been approved and will actually be carryover if I don't get it completed this year.
Okay,
So the Visitors Bureau has an interactive web map where
Right.
they want to put all of the trails and bike
Mhm.
facilities.
Right.
And so we're working on maybe coordinating with them to enhance their web map, to put planned or proposed bike projects. Or create a tool where people could put where they like to bike and walk. If someone has a route, that's good. So it's really looking forward to that partnership with them and then potentially enhancing that. And I think that is in our bike ed master plan update. It's already approved in the existing overall work program in the work element.
17.
Now, I would, and, because you said that, you know, this thing is kind of like, I mean, we approved this. And so we still, at the TAC, will be approving the projects, right? So, or is this gonna be now moved all to the executive management?
The executive management has taken a look at this. What we'd like you guys to do is exactly what you're doing right now is looking at the project specifics.
Okay.
And from a technical planning perspective, vetting those. That's why we're bringing the overall work program. We're not asking for your approval today. We're asking for direction to take it to the full board. Because I think if you said, I don't want to approve a volunteer program, I would still take a recommendation to approve the volunteer program. The COG board approved it already. It's currently in place. And so then what that action would be doing is kind of reversing their existing
Right,
direction.
no, I just want to make sure in the future, as we're moving forward, that if this is going, that if projects get added, that they're vetted through us first before they go to the executive management.
The only project that's being added is the regional transportation.
No, I'm talking
plan.
about in the future. I mean, I know we're adding
That's the only project that's being added to this work program
Okay.
that you haven't previously discussed in past meetings.
I think what Dave's saying is, next year we come to this point,
Yeah.
and whenever we add new projects that we don't think about right now,
right.
that, do they come to us first, or they go through executive management first?
They go through executive management because we need their approval and direction on the operations budget and the personnel. So that's what they do. We get this template. We didn't ask for their approval on the overall work program. We asked for their direction. My expectation is that you are the technical body, so that you are my expectation is have these discussions with you on the projects and how the projects are added.
So, okay, so in the future, if there's a project, and I'll just pick on the regional transportation fund just for, and you've gone to the executive management group, and they've said, yes, they like this, and it comes to us, and we say, no, this project, for whatever reason, then what I'm hearing is, as long as executive management buys off on it, then you're still gonna recommend it to the board based on that approval. And if that's the case, then even if we vet it, and I'll just say, Angels Camp, sidewalk benefit program, put on by volunteers, and you want to add as a project onto the OWP that goes in front of the executive management group, and you allocate dollars for it, and then it comes here, and we say, oh no, we can do it by this project, or we can add this additional somewhere else, or we can, we don't want to. Why would we want to fund that? I mean, why when it's taking valuable LTF dollars or regional RSTP dollars, then is the recommendation is then at that point, well, okay, now we voted and said, nah, we don't like it, or it needs to be changed. Is it automatically going to go to the board with the executive management recommendation based on that?
No. So the executive management committee's function are the administrative, the operations budget, personnel. So they look at these things in that context. They would look to you, Dave, to do exactly what you're doing. And so even though they say, okay, looks good, I am getting that direction based on their decisions as it pertains to the operations, the personnel, not this technical discussion. So no, your voice still matters, and then would still be carried to the COG board. So the executive management group isn't picking and choosing projects. They're not saying yes or no on
No,
projects.
I understand
Seems
that.
like disjointed. How do they know?
We agree, we
what
really
the-
agree.
Yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
create. the
We didn't
JPA
create
or
it,
policies
and it's
procedures.
Well,
actually.
the policy, wait a second, the policy, let's back up on the policies and procedures. Policies and procedures were created by you guys, and they were. We
When-
created the JPA.
When did I create the
Okay,
policy?
we don't need to go back to the
No,
policies and
No, we
procedures.
do, because we had meetings on this, we had meetings on the policies and procedures, and I was in them. Okay, and and you took them to the board, based on that. So what I wanna, if that's the case, then I'd like to see the policy on the executive management team that was brought out in the JPA, because the JPA doesn't state that the executive management team is looking at operations. That's an internal decision that was made
no,
by the
it
COG.
It does. The JPA is
It
very
states-
specific about the function of the executive management.
That's where it
group.
was created.
When the
Highlighted.
JPA was just
I'll
recently
take that.
adopted, I think in 2011,
Yep.
it really empowered and boosted the role of the executive management group. So I think from our perspective, what we try to keep clear are their roles and their functions. So, and I don't think the Council of Governments would have any concerns about you having a discussion about the quality and type of a project, even though the executive management group looked at the overall work program and the operations budget from a budgetary perspective. They're not looking at it from a technical, planning perspective, and they're not looking at it in terms of planning priorities or other issues or projects. So we agree, it's something that we've been struggling with, I think for 4 years, is that executive management committee. And one of the things that we're asking them for too is not approval of the document, direction to take it forward to the next level. And so I think that allows them to voice their issues and concerns, ask questions, but then it also allows it to be something that really the COG board has the final authority and direction. I think that's the other issue is we've had comments from council members who have said, what do we do? We don't want to just rubber stamp
Yeah.
the technical advisory committee. We don't want to just rubber stamp the executive management committee.
Mhm.
So what does even a recommendation from those committees mean? So I think you are kind of touching on something that we've struggled with, which is getting all this information prepared this
Then
many months
meet
in
with
advance,
them, and
to
then
meet
go
with
to TAC.
them,
So
to meet
we're
with you, to get it before a
Presenting
COG
this
board.
3 times to 3 different committees and
Yeah.
bodies.
But you kind of, it could actually put us in conflict,
Well,
because you're
we
taking
won't
two
allow it to put you in
recommendations.
conflict.
No, we
Well,
won't.
if you're gonna take, what you are, because if you're gonna take the recommendation of the executive management group, and, or move forward with the direction of the executive management group, and you're gonna move forward with the technical advisory committee direction, which could be in conflict with each other, because the executive management group, might have approved the operations of all of this, but yet the TAC committee comes in and says,
Well, when we
the TAC committee comes in and says, we don't,
yeah,
this-
and
this
any,
project-
and any
It's
technical.
inappropriate project, it's not.
Yeah,
a
so
priority
any
for us.
technical
Yeah.
questions you had on any project, we would go back and bring back to you. If there's any technical problems you have on any of the projects, we would explain them to
Yep.
you, we would bring them back to you. That's what we're asking you to do. So if you have any technical issues with the overall work program, I'd be happy to bring you back any information and then bring it to the full council.
And I think from
Well, see,
our
that's what I'm saying
perspective,
right there, you give it to me, but I don't, now I've gotta go to the either I've gotta express that into a TAC meeting, which if that's not before the board meeting, then I've gotta go directly to the board meeting.
right, but here's the
because-
thing, your conflict though. So I won't allow there to be conflict between the executive management and the technical advisory.
That's the job.
They are not looking at the projects and their value and their projects and their priorities. Though I would like to see communication between you, Robert, and your CAO,
Right.
and you, Dave, and your
Right.
city administrator,
Mhm.
so that you are also working as staff to make sure that there's no conflict between your executives and this body. But we've got to keep mind of their function. Their function is the operations budget. They looked at this in context of the operations budget.
And personnel.
That's done. We're not asking you to
But
look at it in context
I
of
guess
the
I have a
operations
question as
budget.
to what comes first? Is it the idea of a project, or is it the financing of the project?
Right.
So if we said, hey, we got this project out here, and this might really fit some really great program that COG administers, Do you go first to you know, I mean, how does that go
It
through the
depends on the
process?
funding source. So with
That's eligible.
CMAQ, LTF, and RSTP, it starts with you. It starts with the project. We make available the funding. RPA and PPM are COG funding that we don't make available to the local jurisdictions to prioritize projects. The COG prioritizes those use, and the COG prioritizes those planning functions. As the RTPA, we have mandated planning functions, and that's where that priority use goes. The second priority is when we're approached by the local jurisdiction, for example, with the grant opportunities. And then we apply for those grant opportunities, and perhaps there's a need for a match or an in-kind contribution.
And then
So
that's
then
all
COG,
meant.
so really the RPA are COG dollars that aren't made available. You know, they're our planning dollars that are required for us for our core functions. And what Dave is saying is there's usually not money for a call for projects on RPA dollars because of that, because the priority use is our work program.
But we
And-
have made exceptions for those in the past for those planning documents.
So the planning documents is where,
When the OWP was the old way, yeah, I mean, everything was on the, because I can remember the call for projects, and we had a list of 5 funding sources, which was all the funding sources. But the past executive directors always, and there's a caveat with that saying that a certain percentage of that had to go for the operations of the actual COG. But there might have been a small amount of money that was available through all of the programs. I mean, that's how I got my PSR 449 funding.
that was
PPM.
RSTP, it was
That was
RSTP.
Well, there was some PPM, well, it all got switched to RSTP, but the original, if you go back in 08 and 09, the original was PPM, and then it got pushed over to RSTP because back in, when we started to move that over. The Angels Camp plan, I think, was all PPM, I think.
Yep,
Yeah.
85,000.
Yeah, that was all PPM money. So that, I'm just trying to, because now with this, I mean, with the executive management group now becoming more of a major player in this thing, I just want to make sure that the roles
We've
are.
been meeting, I've been taking all of these for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
I've always had to go to the executive management committee since the new JPA.
Well, maybe I just woke up because, that could have been it. I was just, yeah, sounds
So,
good,
but it does start with the projects when it's funding that the local jurisdictions we make the funding RSTP, LTF,
Right.
CMAQ.
Right.
So then all of that, we do the call for projects. That doesn't even go to the executive management. It only goes through the
Mhm.
technical advisory committee. Then the programming goes through the council of governments. So remember, executive management, budgeting, operations, personnel. So they're only looking at these tools through that lens. And so they expect that you be looking at these tools from what are the planning priorities? What is COG saying they're going to do? What's on the work program? What's changing here is that the work program now is COG's work program. My direction, implementation of COG board direction, where it used to be all of the city and county projects. So now I think what we should bring is, for your review and approval, the CIP, because that's where all the dollars have gone.
Okay.
CMAQ has gone there, RSTP has gone there, LTF has gone there. So now this is just becoming my operations budget in implementation of COG direction. So when you ask about active transportation and why
Right.
that's going, COG strategic direction. They said that they want to focus on bike ped, they want to focus on opportunities to enhance that. So that's an area that we're focused on.
And so when the COG approves the programming that has gone through the technical advisory, that's when I then implement the programming into the CIP, and then the jurisdictions report on the drawdown or any project
Yeah.
milestones.
Yeah.
Melissa, at this point, there's no recommendation that you want from us.
Well, if you recommend a project be pulled, then let me know. But the issue, you will not be in disagreement with the executive management committee. Your recommendation may disagree with my recommendation, and that's okay. We've been there before too, and that's fine. But that's something that should be presented to the COG board. If there's a priority you would like in place, let us know.
You're taking this to the COG board in March,
Yes.
Yes.
and what is that action going to be?
we're going to recommend approval of
Of the
the
draft
draft. And
to
keep
submit
in
to
mind,
Caltrans.
this is a draft.
Yeah.
This is not grounded in any reality and will change when we bring the final, and it will change drastically when we bring the amendment number 1.
And we know the actual carryover dollars.
Yeah. And it will change drastically if we hear about these grant opportunities for the city and the county. So I think from a planning perspective, RPA is our jurisdiction, COG jurisdiction. It's
Those
not
are
local
our
jurisdiction
So
funding.
what you're telling us basically is you're just showing us what you intend to take to the COG board in March.
Yes.
And there really is no input from us.
No, I want your input. I want to know, this is the conversation we want to have. Is there a project?
Let me ask you then, if that's the case, you have transit administration and planning,
Mhm.
almost $60,000.
Yes,
That's work item number 3.
yes.
What are the elements of that item?
They are our COG core functions. These are standing items in our overall work program.
Mhm.
They have been for the last, I don't know how many
3 years I've had this, a work element.
But let me get the work element. They exist
So it's
in
in
your,
the work element,
it's-
okay.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
already approved, Robert. These are
We've been doing this
unchanged.
for
That's
3
okay.
years.
Yeah.
I could look that up then, if that's what it is. I
Yeah,
could
so
find it.
Robert, just so you know, the administration and interagency coordination, programming and oversight, those are our COG core functions. They don't change year after year. They're standing in the overall work program, and the dollar amounts identified are as close to last year as they ever have been. And what we try to do is we try to account for our staff time and the amount of time and energy we spend as employees on each work element.
Yep.
Then you go into the economic development. These were projects that were funded by the COG board last year, currently exist on the overall work program, and I'm not sure if we will be able to complete those, so you see them carried over.
Mhm.
But these have already been approved by the COG board,
Yep.
and
I-
these are based on the COG priority of business areas, economic development, multimodal transportation, already projects approved by the COG board and approved by this committee last year. And
I was just interested to see what the different elements were within that one
they're the
item, but I
same.
could find that in the,
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
the
in
work,
the, that was
staff
my.
work done on PTMI-SCA, CalEMA, the LTF, STA, all of those items that we deal with transit.
They're the standing items, and they're the items required in the triennial performance audit guidebook. So the functions according to that, those
Okay.
are all in there. It
All of them.
includes our annual financial audits. It includes all of that work.
Yep. short range
Um,
transit.
I
Yep.
thought that was separate item, I thought that was item number 5.
We have, so is this the triennial, Melissa, or is this the annual? Oh, yeah, we
Annual.
did separate it, so it is separated.
Yep.
So transit planning, it includes the grant applications that we do for you, it includes the grant writing we do for 5310, it includes the monitoring of the PTM-ISEA programs, the
CalEMA.
invoicing,
LES.
CalEMA, and I think it's safe to say Melissa spends more than 25% of her time
Oh, definitely.
on that. And then we have also the work that Amber does on the SISTAC, the Interagency Transit Committee, and a number of other functions.
So all of that comes out of that one, right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
all that, okay, so all the different committees, all the different, and you gotta be there or somebody's.
Mhm.
okay,
Yep,
right.
it's just all staff time.
Reviewing the claims, the transit budget, all of those items.
So you guys do understand that all of these projects on here, with the exception of the RTP,
Are
were
already-
approved by this body, are
Previously.
already existing and have been underway for a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing the only project was regarding the act, I didn't have a full understanding what that was. I mean, I remember approving it, I remember we probably talked about it, but I don't remember seeing the work element before that.
Yeah.
That's just mine. So that was the project and what they were doing and how, because I remember after Joan retired that you guys were gonna bring her on as a volunteer and then do all that stuff and then,
So do I have a recommendation from the TAC to take this on to the full council?
Well, it's an informational item only,
Yeah,
so we
so-
can't take any action.
Yeah, there's no action.
So-
I don't see any problem with it.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
That's
Yeah.
all I.
Yep, I'm looking for direction.
And-
And so if we need to agendize it as direction, we'll make that correction and we'll do that. But I think from my perspective, because we consistently run out of time trying to meet these deadlines so far in advance.
Mhm.
So we had to have this done probably 3 weeks ago to get it before the Executive Management Committee. It's not due to Caltrans to March. And so, you know, when our deadlines start crashing up trying to meet these committee deadlines, I don't think it's fair for you to ask you to approve it. So I think you should have time to see it, you should have time to discuss it, say we don't see anything that would prevent us from taking it to the full board, and then still call me if you have it. But I just, you know, because I realize it's the first time that you're looking at these items. So I want to allow time for you to go back and ask questions, and we can modify this. I feel like if we ask for your approval, then it's in stone, can't change. For example, we have discussions with Robert and his 2 projects. They would work their way back in. I don't want to have to come back and stall the whole process to represent it next month.
Yeah.
So that's
Because I
why
do
this
have
committee is kind of been a challenge, I think.
Yeah.
So for me,
Definitely.
not looking for action, just your support to carry it forward to the COG board. And if there are any projects you recommend being removed and no longer supported by the COG board, you know, let us know.
Well, this coordinated human service trend, that'll go away once it's done, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So if we are able to clear, this is just based on right now, because we're
Right,
having to think
right.
about 15, 16 with the work we've got right now.
Right.
So we're just holding places here. And implementation, I think we're going to be looking at the potential for the grant that was approved, the mobility management, and all of those different opportunities. All right. Do you have any other questions? I think that's it. Okay, so I believe I have direction to carry this forward. Do you guys know if we need to say it as an action item if we get direction?
I would think
They,
so.
Yeah,
okay.
technically, you at least need a motion, and even though it's, quote, not a resolution or anything of that nature, and we don't approve resolutions, but I do think we need some type of motion.
Well,
If we're recommending to the board, then we've got to have at least a motion and a second.
Well, it's informational, so I'm just asking if the
See,
members
that's what I'm
support
asking.
the item. It's not
Well,
an
but
action.
even for us to make a statement of
Yeah.
support, that's an action we're taking.
Oh.
Right.
So I think the
Right.
future
Sorry,
should
then
be
I must have-
agendized as an action
Okay.
item.
I'm sorry.
Anytime that you want us to make some type of statement
Yeah.
supporting, you know, whatever, then it should be listed as an action item.
Okay.
That
Okay.
just gives us
I'll
more-
revise that and
Yeah.
make sure I have that on the
Yeah,
next.
because I think
agenda.
at the very least, if we say that they could take more time, we're just looking for direction to bring it forward, then we should say direction,
Okay,
information
I'll
and
make sure
direction.
I
Mhm.
make
Okay.
that clear on the next agenda.
No worries. Okay. The next item that we have, and don't hesitate to call me if you guys have any questions looking at that overall work program. You know.
Or do you want to have a discussion offline about the circulation element?
Sure.
Piqued my interest.
Yes. And then we have for your review,
I see a claim coming.
I hope so, a draft RSTP exchange agreement. So we just did the call for projects. We're going to be talking about the programming of all of those funds and projects. And so for the RSTP, we will have an RSTP exchange agreement. This is an example that's been taken from many of our RTPA counterparts, and I think we're probably one of the last to implement this. It's a draft, so take a look at it, see how you feel about it. We are submitting it for legal counsel review and consideration right now, and wouldn't actually consider implementation of this till the COG board has approved it, but it wouldn't take effect anyway until the 15-16 apportionments.
So you want us just to review this and
Yep.
get back to you? if have
See
any
how you feel,
comments or concerns
as,
on it?
yes,
Okay.
please. As the local jurisdictions, when we allocate you funding, that you will be signing, that you have the responsibility to comply with all of the state and federal guidelines. And then we outline some of those expectations. And we'll agendize this for comments at a later time.
Do you have any idea when you want these by?
We've got time because we don't need to implement them till the 15, 16. So probably the end of this fiscal year or the beginning of the fiscal year. Just depends on how quick you guys are ready to claim that money in 15, 16.
You obtained this from some other jurisdiction,
Correct.
and how old is the document?
It's recent.
And you-
They're currently in use.
What have we used in the past?
We've never used anything in the past. So, but the difference
Wink and a
being,
nod.
What's that?
A wink and a nod.
That's right.
but a lot's changed now.
You
So,
have reviewed this with respect to public contract code requirements and so forth.
you know what, that would probably be a great lens. I have not. So let me know if you have any concerns.
I could already,
I think that that's a good comment.
what is in terms of third-party contracting, what is the basis for it may not be consistent with the informal bidding processes and so forth.
Which
That
page
are
are you
available.
on?
But that wouldn't matter, because once we got the money, then we could do with it, then we gotta.
Look
Because
what it
COG has
says.
already signed the other contract.
Which page, Robert?
What
If
page?
you're looking at
Third page.
item, Article 9,
Third-party contracting?
Article 9, paragraph A, first sentence.
So I'll look and see if
Because I
that's.
could see where maybe there's a sole source thing
Right.
that might happen, or in this case, you're asking us to get Caltrans approval for something.
Let me see,
Now you-
is this LAPM or RSTP? Because this should have been taken from the LAPM for use of exchange funds. So let me double check, because we don't want to be more restrictive than we have to.
Well, I don't think you can do sole source without some approval from Caltrans.
So this is an agreement between the COG and the county.
And now we're putting Caltrans in the middle of it.
Does
Well,
the city have
they-
a similar contract?
They will have a similar.
Yeah.
And so the reason we're not putting Caltrans in the middle of it, Caltrans is already in the middle of it. So what ends up happening is when these funds come from the COG, that I certify that I am compliant with all of these things. Well, that was one thing when COG kept the money and the executive director had control over the projects. So now that we've got the CIP, and now that all of these dollars are going to the jurisdictions, we need to make sure that now you are compliant with Caltrans requirements, state and federal. So this should be in the local assistance procedures manual. I sign that we are, and so what ends up happening is Caltrans comes to me and they say, they'll audit me and say, you're accountable for this. And if I don't have control over the funds or the projects, because now they're designated to the local jurisdictions, I need something that says, you guys are being accountable for the state and federal requirements as I have signed. So it was one thing if I kept the money and I said, I am compliant, but I'm delivering the projects.
The way I see it, RSDP funds are somewhat, they're not large amount of funds. But for that small amount of funds, the things that we have to do, if you look at item C, there's pre-award requirements and all sorts of other stuff. I could understand that we have to go through that kind of stuff when we're dealing with the funding that's coming from Caltrans.
It is
That's-
funding coming from Caltrans.
But direct for some large, the RSTP funding that comes, that's distributed from COG and then comes to us, they're small amounts.
192,000.
Yeah,
It's
they,
still up to
well, when
Over
you
a
look at
3-year
it,
period.
650,000 that we're programming
192 is just
right
one
now.
Or 1 year?
year.
So they are small amounts, but the requirements for small amounts of state and federal money are no different than the requirements for large amounts of state and
Because
federal
that's the
funding.
kinder, gentler Caltrans, you know.
Yeah. So the other thing that you should know,
With their
Robert,
ability to work with locals.
is we are required to report your RSTP projects to the state controller's office on an annual basis. So what used to happen is when all of the RSTP came to the COG operations budget, And the OWP, we would just say COG overall work program projects and operations budget. So now we actually name your projects to the state controller. So we need to make sure that we've got all of these things in place, because I'm signing that I'm responsible for the funds and the projects, when really they're outside of my control. And also, this should not be any more stringent than the Local Assistance Procedures Manual, Chapter 4, use of exchange funds.
And you'll look into that.
We will look into it, but I would love for you to evaluate it based on because this is about liability for my organization, so I would probably take a more conservative approach. So you should look at it from the standpoint of project delivery and local jurisdiction implementation, and I'm probably going to be looking at this from a perspective of, preventing liability to my organization should a jurisdiction not utilize the funds according to state and federal requirements that we've authorized.
And our council's gonna have to look at this.
Yes, your legal count, yes. Yeah. So that's why I think we have time. And so I think if we could just do a staff review, that would be great. If you don't mind, maybe we could agendize this for next month to review staff comments. That way we can make changes and we don't spend too much time with our legal counsels on modifications that we make at a staff level.
So first we do just staff level,
Yep.
and then if we're sort of, it looks good to us, we see, then we need to go on to a legal review after that.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, and now for the review of programming. We have given you guys copies, I think, right there. There it is. So we did the call for projects. The city's gone and revised cost estimates, and we've done our best to work out a programming strategy, which I will be presenting with Lilibeth hopefully this afternoon. Just to walk through, it looks like for the CMAC that we're pretty well balanced. If you look at the second page, we've got all the projects listed, the phase and the amount requested. So where you'll see you have funding, Robert, on your sidewalk project. You've got the majority of your construction programmed in 16-17. I think, yeah, I'm sorry, PE. So what we'll try to do is advance the funding from 17-18 when you go to make an allocation. But I have to try to stay as close to the apportionment as possible. So Dave, I think you guys are pretty good for your Main Street sidewalk projects on CMAC. And then the question that I have is if I can lump these together for you. So if we could just combine them into City of Angels Gapville sidewalk projects.
I think Dave and I have talked about that, and I don't think we have a problem with that, we're going to follow up with them. So
Yeah,
it's easy.
I think that was his recommendation for me. So I'm gonna follow up on that and see if we can put those together. That simplifies things for the City of Angels. I'm hoping that they're going to allow me to have this, little programming offset between 17-18 and 18-19 in my programming. That's something I've got to get headquarters approval on. If we move down to RSTP, we're able to start with the city's collector striping project first. And then something interesting happened here. So with the financial audit, the close of our last fiscal year, Melissa reported to me that we have about $195,000 in RSTP that's unallocated within the fund. So what we can do is make that funding available. I think that Robert Packinger needed 14-15 funding to move forward with the O'Byrne's Ferry Bridge project. So that would allow 195 and 14-15 for you to carry that project forward. And then we would have the balance of it would not be available till 15-16. But that would get you started, Robert, because I think you said you had a critical deadline. But you'll see we'll have a remaining balance of RSTP funding that's available. That's not really available. It just offsets that unallocated apportionment of 195. So at the end of 18-19, that should still be sitting there. But I think it helps address a city concern where you were worried about cost overruns. and wanting to have some available funding should there be cost overruns. So I think it kills two birds with one stone, you know, gets Robert moving forward on Oburn's Ferry Bridge, and then gives the city some confidence that there is funding should there be cost overruns.
Let me back up here. Okay, so we're looking at RSTP, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so we're saying 15, 16, we're over allocated by 21,000.
Correct.
We're under allocated for the rest of this
Yeah.
program.
So-
Which is saying that by 100, and we're over by 190,000.
Well, you're technically not over by 190 because we wrapped up 14, 15, closed our books, and I have 195,000 in unallocated apportionment. So you'll see this right here in this note.
Oh, okay.
So Robert needs to start that project in 14, 15. And so this is a way that we can use that unallocated apportionment. Yeah, he needs, for that, he requested Oburn's Ferry, let's see, it's my eyesight off. 347,000 total. So that would get him started. Then we would have some cushion should there be any cost overruns in any of the programs. And so that 190 is actually just offset by the 195. If there's no cost overruns, then when we do the 3-year call for projects,
Didn't you
That's
guys have
similar.
funding for that already?
The Burn Ferry Road left turn, the right of way.
For the right of way, okay. What are they,
We
just,
we completed PE,
that's right, okay, all right.
that's ready to go.
Right,
so the
okay.
only thing he's short is that utility relocation.
That's right.
They're
And
ready
then
to
I go
go,
for construction money.
PG&E is ready to go.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right, okay.
And so that would, I think, kill two birds with one stone. Then you'll notice with LTF, those small amounts of money for the Main Street construction. So what I'm doing is I'm going to earmark those apportionments because Dave is going to need them on construction in 18, 19, because we don't have enough CMAQ to stay true to my apportionment.
All right.
So that will help offset those construction costs, I believe.
Okay. Well, what are these numbers on the side?
Actually, I don't know that those are accurate. They were a formula, so that was in there. I believe city is 1.3, county was 558, but I didn't update those. They should have been deleted, I'm sorry.
There's a total of 2 million total, and so I guess the question is, that's that additional.
Yeah, we've got
190,
2.063 available.
Right.
If you look at the back page, all of the requests add up to the 2.063 available. So that is a strategy that I'm recommending. If you guys could take a look at it, make sure that according to your project across the various funding sources, I've met your request for need. If you can also look at it and make sure that I've met your request for schedule as close as possible, because we've got to stay within the apportionment balances. But
I know David's talked to you, so I'm sure ours are, all right.
so, but take it back, make
I'll
sure
take it
he's
back.
comfortable. Robert, are you comfortable? Take time to think about it, let me know. But this is the strategy I would like to recommend to the COG board. And I think it'll get you working pretty quick.
So what do you need from us on this?
Just a review of the programming. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know.
Can you send this to me electronically?
We did.
You did?
They were
You did?
sent, yes. We can send them again. It was sent yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, call if you have any questions. Call if there's anything we need to move around or if something doesn't make sense. But I think we did the best we can with the funding that's available and the years that we have it available. So the only thing is with that 15-16 negative balance, I'm just, because it'll be reimbursed on a reimbursement basis for the RSTP, just hoping that I get through, maybe not all the reimbursements are submitted. So for example, Dave, if you guys have 80, that by the time you claim and start billable work, that there might be something that carries me over till the next 16, 17 apportionment. So that's kind of what I'm gonna do, because the 195 will clear the account.
Oh, you mean in 15, 16 for
Yeah.
RCP?
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see us, I mean, 15, I don't see us spending it all. I'll be shocked if he spends it all in one year.
Okay, so the other thing that we're going to have to talk about then, with that is what we do when there's savings. So Robert, when we did the call for projects last year, if there were project savings, we said it went back to the next priority project. Currently, there are no funding needs on the approved CIP project list that we're aware of. And so I think we're gonna have to have a conversation amongst the city and county as to how we wanna handle if they're for their next priority project, or should they be put back into the pot for redistribution. So I think we're gonna have to have a conversation about that, because what we had said was it goes back into the pot for redistribution. And the reason that we said that is because we had seen jurisdictions maybe overclaim with the hope of being able to put the remaining money on another project that they prioritized more than the COG perhaps. So we don't want to see that happen again. But what we don't want to see is maybe a jurisdiction getting disadvantaged because they're truthfully reporting, because this is the honor system. So the jurisdiction may be truthfully reporting carryover that may have otherwise gone unaudited. So I just want to make sure we've got a fair playing field. So we'll be bringing that back as an item for discussion.
And we have some with I know we're gonna have some extra money with the PSR we did with 449. And that's a good discussion, because that's, God, the Caltrans is, we're waiting for their last invoice to see what it is, but I don't think they spent all the money, so I don't know yet, but that's what I'm gonna be finding out.
So something to think about.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so then we'll move on to committee reports.
Committee reports.
Oh, you know what, I'm sorry, I forgot the amended agenda item, if I may. 2G, the Transit Task Force. At the COG board meeting, Supervisor Pawnee made the recommendation for consideration of a Transit Task Force. We talked about this sort of informally at the Executive Management Committee meeting. One of the things I was thinking is we have already the Interagency Transit Committee that meets regularly to make productivity improvement recommendations to the transit agency. It's a core function. So I wanted to throw it out there, see what you guys thought of the recommendation from Supervisor Pawnee. And I think that it was recommended to go before the City Council and the Board of Supervisors for a presentation on transit and potentially an appointment from those governing boards.
I'll start out. I mean, right now we have SISTAC and ITC that talk about transit right now. Is this, I guess, and when I was listening to Councilmember Ponte, the question I came up with is this more for the electeds to have a say? They already have a foot at the table, so to speak, but they don't really. I mean, the Board of Supervisors, I mean, they get it all, and so, but the COG board really, they get the aftermath of that. So is it something that, I mean, I was kind of, because we had these committees, the county board meets on it.
So what we're trying to figure out is the purpose of the committee.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of this particular committee?
So I think just based on the discussion, but I would encourage you to talk directly with Supervisor Pawnee then. But I think the purpose is to monitor implementation of the recommendations within the organizational maintenance analysis and the short-range transit plan. So that there's a plan, so that, and Robert, you and I kind of talked about this, you know, that the county has put together sort of an implementation plan with tasks, with a schedule, with delivery items, and that the ITC, you know, could and definitely should play this role for reporting and monitoring on implementation of those things.
Yeah, that was my thought process, is that, and I know I'm on the ITC, but we rarely meet, so I know it's a member of us, you know, it's Deborah and I and Amber right now, but there are no electeds on that committee, so, I mean, maybe there's an appointment of the electeds, or members from the COG board, the city or county, to the ITC.
We'll talk to Supervisor Connie and try to flesh that out a little bit more.
Yeah. Just not quite sure how it would work within the committee framework. And not only that, but that's gonna even put more of an undue burden on you as staff, because you're gonna be staffing it. It's not gonna be us that are staffing it. And, I mean, and if we've got issues with that already, then maybe we can somehow, when you talk to Supervisor Ponte, that is there something within those committees, within the existing committee structure, that could be done so that there's not an added burden to you guys? I mean, because it's going to be another committee, it's going to be another, you know, and if there's some functionality with the ITC or the CISTAC or even the TAC for that matter, that maybe it just needs to be better. Maybe ITC needs to meet just more regularly. At this point, we're meeting monthly, we're following up on programs, maybe it's that, then actually forming a whole new committee with a whole new set of functions, a whole new set of, you know,
So we'll talk to her. We'll try to get something set up here quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to do
So
that
that-
too, so call me when you set that up.
Deb,
Yes.
we'll do that.
Okay, cool, thank you.
It would probably be good if we were all there then. So,
I'm kind of interested to see what she has. I mean,
you know what, Dave, I think also it would be good if you reached out to Wes and Elaine,
Yeah,
and Michael, and just get a feel, because Michael was part of the discussion with the executive management group.
well, what did the executive, I mean, I guess that's okay, what did the executive, what was there, because you had the chair and the vice chair, you had the two CAOs and the city administrator, and you had yourself as the executive director. I mean,
So
what was the
typically,
flavor of that discussion?
so typically in the executive management group, what we see is usually the CAO and the city administrator are very quiet on all issues, because they're usually there. Before, we've had board of supervisors and city council as chair and vice chair, so, you know, then they're the boss, they call the shots. When there's staff sitting there with a chair and a vice chair, they're the boss, they call the shots, so staff usually sits pretty quiet. So I think it would be good for maybe a meeting with your CAO and city administrator to kind of find out what they think, where they want to go, what issues or concerns they have. But I think
So
that
they didn't express anything in the...
city administrator and the CAO, I don't remember too many comments. I think for our chair and vice chair, and our chair, John Gomes, is here. If you'd like to join us for this discussion. But from their perspective, I think the idea is that we don't need to recreate something new.
Right.
That the ITC is the body that should be making performance recommendations. And I think that the ITC has, though we've been doing the organizational and maintenance analysis, I think we need to be more accountable in terms of following up on those recommendations, having Calaveras Transit report at the ITC what the plan is, what the delivery is, and making those ITC meetings a standing mandatory meeting. But it has been something where we've been working on transit planning for so long, and we've been meeting so often that we've just counted those as ITC. I think this gets us back to focusing on that core group and what we're responsible for. I think that they're open to appointments from the city and the county, but I think what we recognize is that needs to be supported by the city and county before it's really directed by the COG board. So if the city, county, board of supervisors are like, we don't really have a problem, we really don't want to sit on another committee, then what is the COG board really taking action on or deciding? So I think that that's why I would like for you guys to reach out to your CAO and to Supervisor Pawnee and maybe Elaine to get a better feel. Because ultimately, it's going to be a presentation in your jurisdictions on transit. Ultimately, it's going to be action that you take as staff. So I just gotta make sure that you guys are supportive of whichever way we move forward, and that so is your CAOs and your electeds. Okay. Now I think we can move into committee reports. Dave, anybody have anything? We didn't, if you don't have anything, that's okay.
I've got a couple things.
Sure.
One is that, and this is the planner, I don't know if this is with Peter or not, but this is just with me. I mean, if we're gonna start recording these things, then I think, I know in past association governments, you know, even the TAC meetings had a chair and vice chair, you know, run the meetings, and with, you know, and if we're getting more formalization in terms of action items and that maybe we need to start taking a look at how everything is put together so that in terms of, I mean, if we're just gonna continue to use the COG agenda, because this is pretty much the COG board meeting agenda, I mean, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work for us, I don't think. And so
There has to be a method for the group to be able to add things to the agenda, maybe have a
Right.
discussion prior to the meeting of what's going to be, you know, on the agenda and so forth.
Sure. So I think we send out, because actually this is all, I believe, in the JPA. So first, the executive director chairs the meeting. We do have a deadline when all of the agenda items are due. So you guys are allowed to put agenda items on the agenda. And we are in regular contact with your staff, specifically Deborah, on what the items are and when you can get them to us. We are, however, very, very flexible because most of the time they're not available according to those scheduled deadlines that far in advance. So we allow them to come out, you know, as late as we can within those Brown Acts. The agenda, I believe, is emailed 1 week prior to the meeting. And we also allow for any input or comments if you need it modified. So I believe we allow that time, Robert.
well, I mean, I think like, you know, on our, for example, like on the COG agenda, you have city council reports, county reports, rural reports. And then maybe that might be needed to put on this agenda so that if we do have items, there's a place on the agenda where they're at.
So we did committee reports. That's the
Okay.
opportunity for you to provide a report. We just wanted to simplify the process that
Okay.
people, it's not a mandatory agenda item. If you have nothing to contribute, that's fine. So this is your opportunity to discuss any items of relevance.
Maybe
to
for
this
clarity,
committee.
it could be agency/committee report or something like that.
Sure.
Because we're not really a committee.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
comfortable with the format, you know,
Okay.
of you know, try to keep it as informal as we can, but still follow the legal requirements.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So Dave, did you want to provide any updates to the committee on?
Basically, of course, you guys probably know more, it's more for the county than the COG, because you guys, we met, staff met with the Partnership Planning Grant, with the staff management group. I think that was a great meeting yesterday that we had. We started looking at alternatives and that, so I think the advisory committee is gonna have there's gonna be some good lively discussion, as that moves through the process. See the city, regarding CMAC, I know Dave and Colleen are working on more of the design, getting the design knocked out. And I'm working on getting the environmental RFP out. I gotta send it to like three firms, so I gotta get that done. So working on that, hopefully I'll have that wrapped up here in the next week. And then, let's see what else are other projects. I think that's about it right now. Partnership planning.
How you guys doing here? How's it going there?
Oh, actually, that's a good one. we just adopted the ordinances that we needed to adopt it in terms of density bonus and transitional housing and all those. Yeah, so I guess now we're ready to rock and roll. Like Amy's doing our housing element as well. She's pretty much putting the policy document already together. She's been waiting. For us, she needed these ordinances to get adopted. So now that they're adopted, now we'll be ramping up and hopefully get it to, at least to the planning commission or the council in April. I told Michael that we might have to have a joint meeting. We did that before, when we did the last housing element, we did a joint meeting with the planning commission and city council. So they all saw it at one time, they all, decided on one time, and then boom, we knocked it out in one shot. So that's something that we're working on right now. So yeah, so we'll be cranking up on that, and then what else? Housing element. CCOG. Oh, we're finalizing. We are finalizing the PSR PDS document with Caltrans, and the city is formally going to look during the relinquishment process. And now that Grace is back, so we'll be ramping up those talks and stuff. However, we were informed that because we got the extension on the cooperative to 2017, that not a whole lot's probably going to happen until then, until a formalization to close out, because we're going to have to close out the co-op and close out everything, and that can't be done until 2017. But we're going to be working with her to get all that lined up and ready to go. They've got to get people out there to review the bridge, and they've got to get people up, and then we've got to have a negotiation with the money to see, and if there are available funds to reimburse us for that. So that should be a big item coming up here. So other than that, that's all right.
All right, Robert?
You can see that there's construction activity going on for the bus shelter project.
Good.
That's when will it end?
As soon as possible, this month.
It's not a long construction schedule, it's fairly
The
quick.
San Andreas and Murphy's be finished by probably mid next week.
Good.
And underground storage tank removal is occurring at 1226. Should be done today. You're familiar with the work that we did with trying to get the aid mod for the E76 and so forth that's for our RFA for construction for 1226. And we'll go out to bid and so forth.
Right.
Get that thing hopefully in the next month or so out to bid, so we can have a contractor on board, and we're trying to coordinate that so that when school is out,
Right.
they can work out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So Dave, we're probably gonna have to change your programming on Murphy's Grade Road to add the 165.
To what?
Well, to add the 165.
Oh. To add it?
Yes, because that's what ended up happening to Robert. They had local funding on the project that wasn't included as part of the total project cost. So when they went to submit the RFA, there was a problem. They had to do an admin mod to add the room funding that they had already on the project. So we'll probably have to add the RSDP that you're adding to that project. So when you go to submit the RFA for construction, you've got that local contribution included in the total cost.
Okay.
And then the project here on Mount Andrews Road, Highway 49, we're meeting with Caltrans to discuss the archaeological work that has been done to date and what needs to be done to complete that environmental document.
For
Mount Andrews Road, right here, there was a settlement sometime, so there was an expected artifacts that you can find.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Peter, anything that you have?
Well, I'm on the 24-hour general plan channel, and the public review period ends the middle of March. We don't really have a firm date. We don't have any date scheduled yet for planning commission board hearings. My intent is anything that comes in written form by the 20th of March, I will include in my analysis and review for the planning commission, but public comments can come in as long as the planning commission and board are still, deliberating over the draft plan. Gave the board a schedule last week. best case scenario is we'll have adoption of the plan in June of 2016, and that's depending on how much time they want to spend debating the draft, which could take many, many months, and we'll spread it out further, but that's their prerogative. I just received an administrative draft housing element update, so we're looking at that to try to meet our deadline of getting adopted by April. Because that, you know, reflects back on the agreement to go to the 8-year plan. If for some reason it gets delayed, I'm not sure exactly what happens with our ability to move to that 8-year cycle as opposed to stay in the 5-year cycle. But we're working with HCD, and it seems that there's some flexibility there still. So we hope to get a draft to HCD within the next couple of weeks. They can review it, and then I like your idea of holding a joint hearing on the housing element and streamline the process.
Yeah. It worked well for us last time. We just waited. So.
All right, so Michelle, did you have anything you'd like to add?
As you know, I'm subbing for Carl Baker, and he didn't have nothing at this time.
All right, well, thank you, Michelle, for
Sure.
joining us
Sure.
today. And John, thank you, John Gomes,
Yeah.
Chair of the Calaveras Council of Governments, for observing our Technical Advisory Committee meeting. So did you have anything that you'd like to,
No,
any
just-
public comment?
Right now, it's just a learn and understanding of who's doing what where.
All right, well, thanks for joining us. So without any further information, we can adjourn the meeting. Thanks. Hey, Robin.